My mother looked me dead in the eye and said, "We are not funding this circus." With that single sentence, she can lead my wedding and the obedient version of her daughter. I replied with just one word, understood. They thought that was surrender, but they did not know it was a declaration of war. She did not destroy my big day because she disliked my fiancé. She did it to hide the fact that they had stolen a fortune worth more than their reputation. I am Ella Scott, and this is the story of the day my mother can lead my wedding just to hide the fact that they had stolen the future of their own daughter. If you are watching this right now, look at the screen. I am holding up my phone. That screenshot right there, the one with the contact name Mom at the top. That is Exhibit A. Read the text bubble. It says, "We are not funding this circus." 6 words. That was all it took. In a single sentence, she deleted the wedding, erased my immediate future, and killed the version of me that had spent 29 years trying to be good. I replied with exactly one word, understood. They thought that was a white flag. They thought understood meant I was retreating to my room to cry into my pillow like I did when I was 16. They did not know it was a declaration of war. Before I tell you everything, I need to know you are actually here with me. The algorithm suppresses stories like this because they are ugly and people prefer pretty lies. So, please go down to the comments right now and just type hi or tell me where you are watching from. If you believe that no one deserves to be silenced by the very people who are supposed to protect them, hit that subscribe button. This story is not going to be beautiful. It is not going to be one of those heartwarming family reconciliation videos. But I promise you one thing, it is real. Let me set the scene for you. I am sitting here in my apartment in Briarford. It is a small place not like the estate I grew up in. The only light comes from a vintage desk lamp casting a dim yellow glow across the room. It is quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that rings in your ears after a bomb has gone off. But before the dust has settled, spread out on the coffee table in front of me is a pile of heavy cream-colored envelopes. Those are the wedding invitations. We had not even mailed them all out yet. They sit there like a stack of bricks weighing down the room. And right next to them, resting on the bare wood of the table, is my engagement ring. I took it off 5 minutes ago. My finger still feels light, almost naked, where the band used to sit. I did not take it off because I stopped loving the man who gave it to me. I took it off because wearing it right now feels like a lie. It feels like pretending I am still the same woman I was yesterday morning. And I am not. That woman is dead. She died the moment my mother looked at me with eyes as cold as polished marble and decided my happiness was an expense she was no longer willing to justify. You might be wondering who these people are to the outside world. The Marlowe family is the picture of stability and grace. My mother, Vivian Marlowe, is a renowned therapist. She has written 3 best-selling books on family dynamics. She goes on morning talk shows and tells America how to raise resilient children. She preaches authenticity. She tells her clients that living your truth is the only path to mental health. She built a career, a reputation, and a small fortune on the idea of being real. But the irony is she could not survive her own daughter choosing a life that did not fit her brand. My father Charles and my younger sister Belle, they were there too in that room when the sentence was handed down. They stood there like a Greek chorus of cowardice. They stood on the side of reason. That is what they called it. They said they were being pragmatic. They said they were protecting the family name. To them, I was the one standing on the side of madness because to people like them, freedom looks like insanity. I want to talk about that moment, I said. Understood. When I said it, I felt numb. My hands were shaking. Not visibly, but that internal vibration that makes you feel like your bones are turning to powder. My tongue felt thick. I thought I was saying it just to make the noise stop. I thought I was saying it to end the conversation so I could get out of that suffocating house before I collapsed. But looking back at it now, Sitting here in this half-light, I realized that understood was not capitulation. It was a command code. It was the moment my operating system rebooted. It was the moment I stopped being Ella, the daughter who wanted to please, and started being Ella, the woman who wanted answers. Let me give you the context just so we are clear on who is telling you this story. I am 29 years old. I am not a child asking for an allowance. I work for the Meridian Ledger Group. I am a financial consultant for mid-sized enterprises. I spend my days looking at spreadsheets, analyzing profit margins, and telling strangers how to manage their money. I am good at it. I am rational. I am organized. My fiancé is Noah Lane. He is a software engineer, the kind of guy who builds things from code and logic. He is currently climbing the ladder, doing well, brilliant and steady. We are not destitute. We are not asking for charity. We were not asking my parents to pay for the wedding because we could not afford to buy dinner. We were accepting their contribution because it is tradition, because they insisted, because it was supposed to be a celebration of two families joining together. Or so I thought. I need you to stay with me until the end of this video. I know the internet has a short attention span and you probably have a dozen other notifications popping up right now, but you need to hear this because it was only at the very end, after the shock wore off, after I drove away from their perfect driveway, that I realized the truth. My mother did not cancel my wedding because she disliked Noah. She actually pretended to like him for years. She did not cancel it because the venue was too expensive or the flowers were the wrong shade of white. She did not cancel it because she thought I was too young or too immature. She canceled it because of a number. She can let it because getting married triggers a legal process she thought she could avoid forever. She canceled it to hide a sum of money that is worth more than their dignity, more than their reputation, and certainly more than their love for me. I mentioned a circus earlier. That was her word, but I am going to reclaim it. We are not funding this circus, she said. For my entire life, I have been the well-trained performer in the Marlowe family circus. I jumped through the hoops. I balanced on the tightrope of their expectations. I smiled when the audience applauded, and I stayed silent when the ringmasters snapped the whip. I wore the costumes they picked. I performed the tricks they taught me. I thought that if I performed well enough, if I was the perfect daughter, eventually they would let me come down from the wire and just be a person. But that is not how a circus works. The show must go on. And the performers are just assets. Yesterday, I stepped out of the ring. I took off the costume and instead of walking away, I went to the lighting booth and I turned the spotlights around. I am pointing them directly at the VIP box where my family is sitting. You think you know drama? You think you know dysfunctional families? You have no idea. 3 weeks after my mother led my wedding, the phone in my apartment started ringing, and then my cell phone. And then Noah's phone. It was not just family. It was lawyers. It was bank representatives. It was people I had not spoken to in 10 years. The phone lines were burning up. Not because they missed me, not because they were sorry, not because they wanted to reconcile. They were calling because the immaculate, polished, perfect empire named Marlowe had started to crack from the inside out. And they knew deep down that the person holding the sledgehammer was the quiet daughter who had finally had enough. They broke my heart to save their bank accounts. But in doing so, they handed me the weapon I needed to dismantle them. I am looking at the lens of this camera right now and I am imagining my mother watching this. I know she will. She monitors her public image with the obsession of a hawk circling a field mouse. She is probably sitting in her study surrounded by her mahogany bookshelves and her awards, sipping her herbal tea, waiting for me to apologize. She is waiting for me to take this video down. She is waiting for the good Ella to come back. She is going to be waiting a long time because the Ella she knows is gone. The Ella she knows died the second she called my love for Noah a circus. To understand how we got here, to understand why a mother would sabotage her own child's happiness with such clinical precision. We have to go back. We cannot start with the lawsuits or the forensic accountants. We cannot start with the victory. We have to start with the wound. We have to go back to that afternoon at Willowcrest Hall. It was a Tuesday. The sky was that bruised purple color you get before a summer storm. I drove up the gravel driveway thinking we were going to discuss table settings and floral arrangements. I thought we were going to argue about whether to have chicken or fish. My mother thought she was just canceling a party. She thought she was cutting a line item from a budget. She thought she was managing a crisis. She had no idea that she was signing the death warrant for her own reputation. So, grab a drink, settle in, because I am about to tell you exactly what happens when you push the quiet one too far. This is not just a story about a canceled wedding. This is a story about what happens when the ATM machine fights back. This is a story about the price of freedom. And let me tell you, the tax on it is steep, but I was finally willing to pay it. Let's go back to Willowcrest Hall. It started with a vibration in my pocket. I was at my desk at the Meridian Ledger Group, staring at a spreadsheet filled with third-order projections for a mid-sized logistics firm. My phone buzzed against my hip. I pulled it out, expecting a confirmation from a florist, or maybe a text from Noah asking what I wanted for dinner. Instead, it was a message from my mother. Come to Willowcrest Hall immediately. We need to discuss the wedding. There was no greeting. There was no sign-off. There was no question mark at the end of the sentence. It was a summon. It was polite, grammatically correct, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the digital equivalent of a subpoena. I remember staring at the screen, feeling a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I tried to tell myself it was just a final planning session. Maybe she wanted to go over the seating chart again. Maybe she had found a better supplier for the linens. My mother was a perfectionist. After all, a sudden meeting to discuss napkin folds was not entirely out of character, but deep down. Beneath the layer of rationalization I had built over 29 years, I knew better. The tone was too sterile. It felt like being called to the principal's office, or worse, to a performance review, where the paperwork for termination had already been printed. I drove to Willowcrest Hall with the radio off. The estate sits at the very end of a long, winding gravel driveway lined with ancient oak trees. As I approached, the house loomed into view like a monument to unattainable standards. It is a sprawling colonial revival, painted a white so bright it hurts your eyes in the afternoon sun. The shutters are a glossy, perfect black. The hedges are trimmed with such geometric precision they look fake. The lawn is a seamless carpet of green that never dares to grow a weed. It is a beautiful house. It has been featured in 3 different architectural digests, but to me, it has always looked like a museum where touching the exhibits is strictly prohibited. It is a house that cares more about how it photographs than how it feels to live inside it. I parked my modest sedan next to my father's gleaming luxury SUV and my mother's pristine convertible. The silence when I stepped out of the car was heavy. It was not the peaceful silence of nature. It was the oppressive silence of a place where chaos is not allowed to exist. I walked up the front steps, my heels clicking loudly on the stone. I used my key to open the heavy oak door, but it felt like I was breaking in. The air inside was conditioned to a crisp 68 degrees. It smelled of lemon oil, fresh leaves, and old money. I found them in the formal living room. This is a room we rarely used growing up. It was reserved for guests, for galas, for interviews. It was a stage and the actors were already in position. My father, Charles, was standing near the window, looking out at the garden. He was fiddling with his cufflinks, twisting the gold medal over and over again. He did not turn around when I walked in. He just kept staring at the hydrangeas as if they held the secrets of the universe. His back was stiff, the posture of a man who had been told to stand there and not make a scene. My sister, Belle, was draped across the beige velvet chaise lounge. She was 24, beautiful in that sharp, angular way that looks good on Instagram. She was scrolling through her phone, the blue light reflecting in her eyes. When I entered, she glanced up, gave me a thin, tight smile that did not reach her eyes, and then went back to her screen. It was the kind of smile you give a stranger in an elevator, polite, dismissive, and entirely empty. And then there was my mother, Vivian Marlowe, stood by the marble fireplace. She was wearing a slate gray dress that fit her perfectly, her posture impeccable, her chin raised slightly. A single strand of pearls rested against her collarbone, catching the light from the crystal chandelier above. She looked like a statue carved from ice and judgment. She looked like the expert she claimed to be, the woman who wrote books on how to build healthy families while running her own like a military operation. There were no hugs. There were no hells. No one offered me a drink. No one asked how my drive was. I stopped in the center of the Persian rug, clutching my purse like a shield. "I am here," I said. My voice sounded small in the cavernous room. My mother turned her head slowly. She looked at me with an expression I had seen 1,000 times before. It was the look she gave me when I got a B on a report card or when I wore a dress she thought was unflattering. It was a look of disappointed appraisal. She took a breath and then she delivered the line that would sever the last thread holding me to this family. "We are not funding this circus." She said it calmly. She said it without raising her voice. She said it the way a CEO announces a round of layoffs to a boardroom. It was a decision that had already been made, stamped, and filed. I blinked. The words hung in the cold air. "What, the wedding?" She clarified as if I were a slow child. "We are pulling our financial support effective immediately." But I stammered, my brain trying to catch up with the sudden shift in reality. "The invitations, the deposits, the venue is fully booked. The wedding is in 2 months. Cancel it," she said. She waved her hand dismissively, a gesture that erased 2 years of planning in a second. "Why?" I asked. My voice cracked. "Is it money, Dad? Is the company okay?" I looked at my father. He finally turned from the window, but he would not meet my eyes. He looked at the floor, then at his wife, then back at the window. He cleared his throat, a weak rattling sound, but said nothing. "This is not about money, Ella," my mother said, her voice sharpening. "This is about standards. It is about the Marlowe brand." She took a step toward me. "We have indulged this fantasy long enough. We thought you would come to your senses. We thought you would realize that Noah Lane is simply not adequate." "Noah is a senior engineer," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "He is brilliant. He treats me well. He is common," my mother cut in. "He has no pedigree. He has no ambition beyond a paycheck. He is perfectly fine for a fling, Ella. But he is not husband material, not for this family." She began to pace, her heels sinking silently into the thick rug. "And frankly, you are not ready. Look at you. You are frantic. You are emotional. You are trying to force this marriage because you think it will fix you. You are not stable enough to build a family. And I will not pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to watch you fail publicly." My heart was hammering against my ribs. Felt like a trapped bird. "I am not unstable. I have a career. I have a life. You have a job," she corrected. "A mid-level job. And this wedding, it is becoming a spectacle. It is tacky. It is desperate. It is going to damage the brand I have spent 30 years building. People look to the Marlowe for excellence." This she gestured vaguely at the space between us. "This is a mess and we are not funding this circus." I looked at Belle. Surely my sister would say something. Surely. She knew how much this meant to me. Belle finally looked up from her phone. She tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear and smirked. Honestly, Ella, it is for the best. The color scheme was a little tragedy anyway. Better luck next time. She said it with a little lilt in her voice, like she was consoling someone who had lost a round of mini golf. Not their entire future. Better luck next time. I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I looked at my father again. He flinched. For a second, I saw a flicker of pain in his eyes. He opened his mouth and I thought, here it is. He is going to step in. He is going to be my father. Listen to your mother, Ella. He mumbled. She knows best. That was it. That was the betrayal. It was not the money. It was the absolute abandonment. He was not a partner in this marriage. He was a piece of furniture in my mother's dollhouse. I stood there feeling the blood drain from my face. My hands were freezing cold, yet I could feel sweat trickling down my back. My mind went blank. For 29 years, I had a script for moments like this. The script said, cry, beg, apologize, promise to be better, promise to change whatever they want changed. Please just love me. I could feel the tears pricking the back of my eyes, ready to follow the script. And then something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was quiet. It was the sound of a tether breaking in deep space. I looked at my mother. I looked at her perfect hair, her cold eyes, the pearls that probably cost more than my car. I looked at the woman who claimed to be an expert on love and realized she did not know the first thing about it. I took a deep breath. I pulled my shoulders back. I let the script fall to the floor and incinerate. Understood, I said. My voice was steady. Surprised me. My mother blinked. She had been expecting the tears. She had been primed for the argument, ready to dissect my emotions and use them against me. She did not know what to do with understood. Good, she said, recovering quickly. I am glad you are finally seeing reason. We can release a statement saying it was a mutual decision to postpone due to personal growth. Understood, I said again. But in my head, the word meant something entirely different. Understood. That meant I saw them. I really saw them. Understood. That meant this was no longer my childhood home. This was a crime scene and I was the witness. I turned to leave. As I pivoted, my eyes swept across the mahogany side table near the door. There was a manila folder sitting there. It was cream-colored, heavy stock. On the tab, written in my mother's elegant, distinctive cursive, was my name, Ella. The folder was slightly open. I paused just for a second. My eyes focused on the document protruding from the bottom. It was a printed form. I could read the header clearly, even upside down. Willowbridge Estate Cancellation Form. And below that, a date stamp. My heart stopped. The date stamp was from 3 weeks ago. This was not a conversation. This was not a decision they had come to this afternoon after agonizing over the budget. This was a premeditated execution. They had canceled the venue nearly a month ago. They had let me continue planning. Let me continue dreaming. Let me continue writing checks for deposits I would never get back. All while holding the kill switch in their hands. I felt a wave of nausea, but I swallowed it down. I looked over at Belle. She was typing furiously on her phone now, her thumbs flying across the glass. I took a small step to the side, just enough to catch the angle of her screen. I saw the text bubble, Bender confirmed. She is taking it better than expected. No tears yet. I looked away before she could catch me. So the vendors knew, my sister knew, my parents knew. Everyone knew my wedding was dead except for the bride. They had been managing me. They had been coordinating the demolition of my life behind my back, probably in a group chat I was not a part of. I felt a strange sensation then. It was not sadness anymore. It was clarity. It was the kind of crystalline focus you get right before a car accident. I did not scream. I did not pick up a vase and throw it at the fireplace. I did not slap my sister. I just walked to the door. "Goodbye, Mother. Goodbye, Charles," I said. I could not bring myself to call him Dad. I stepped out into the hallway. The air out there was just as cold, but it felt different now. It felt like the air in a tunnel leading out of a prison. I reached for the heavy brass handle of the front door. "Ella." My father's voice floated out from the living room. It was weak, barely a whisper. I paused, my hand on the latch. I looked back through the archway. My father was still standing by the window. His back was to the room. I saw his shoulders shake. Just once, a small violent tremor. I waited for a heartbeat. I thought he might turn around. I thought he might run after me. I thought he might finally be the man I needed him to be. But he didn't. He just stood there staring at the garden, keeping his perfect suit unwrinkled, keeping his silence. I opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch. I pulled the heavy oak door shut behind me. The sound of the latch clicking into place was loud. It sounded like a gunshot. It sounded like a judge banging a gavel. It sounded like the final lock turning on a vault. I walked to my car, my legs moving on autopilot. The sun was still shining. The birds were still singing. The perfect lawn was still perfect. But as I keyed the ignition, I knew that the world had fundamentally changed. I was not just a daughter anymore. I was a victim who had just gathered the first pieces of evidence. And as I drove down that long gravel driveway, watching the house shrink in my rearview mirror, I knew one thing for certain. I was going to burn that circus to the ground. The drive back to my apartment that evening was a blur of copper-gray sky and red tail lights. The sun was setting over Briarford, casting long, bruised shadows across the highway. I realized with a sick sort of irony that I was driving down the exact stretch of Interstate 95 that I used to stare at from my bedroom window when I was 16. Back then, I would press my forehead against the cold glass and imagine that the headlights were stars in a river, flowing toward a freedom I could not quite name. I used to promise myself that one day I would get in a car and just drive until the air smelled different. Until the crushing weight of being a Marlowe was just a speck in the rear-view mirror. And here I was 13 years later driving that same road. But I was not escaping. I was retreating. I was driving back to a small apartment that suddenly felt less like a home and more like a holding cell for a woman whose life had just been canceled due to budget cuts. My phone rang 4 times on the drive home. The screen lit up with the name Noah and a picture of us from a trip to Maine last October. Wind blown and laughing. Every time it rang, I felt a physical jolt of nausea. I could not answer it. I simply could not slide my thumb across the screen and hear his voice. Warm and steady, asking me how the meeting went. How was I supposed to tell him? How does a woman tell the man she loves that her parents looked at their union and saw a line item they wanted to delete? It felt humiliating. It made me feel like a failed project, something that had been killed in the boardroom because the key performance indicators were not projecting enough growth. I felt cheap. I felt like an investment that had not matured. So, I let the phone ring until it went to voicemail and then I turned it off. I spent that night sitting in the dark, staring at the wall, feeling the silence of the apartment wrap around me like a shroud. But by the time the sun came up the next morning, the shame had started to curdle into something else. It was hardening. It was turning into suspicion. I called in sick to work. I told my manager I had a family emergency, which was technically true, depending on how you define emergency. Then I got in my car and drove straight back to Willow Rest Hall. I knew my parents would not be there. My father had a standing golf game on Wednesday mornings, a networking ritual he had maintained for 20 years regardless of the weather or the state of his marriage. My mother would be at her clinic seeing patients, nodding empathetically while she told them how to set boundaries. The ultimate hypocrisy. Belle would be sleeping in until noon or at Pilates. The house would be empty. I told myself I was going there to retrieve some wedding things. I had left a box of sample fabrics and a binder of vendor contracts in the sunroom. That was the lie I told the security guard at the gate when I punched in the code. But as I walked up the front steps, I knew that was not the real reason. I was not there to pack. I was there to investigate. I walked into the foyer and the silence of the house hit me differently than it had yesterday. Yesterday it had felt oppressive. Today it felt expectant. It felt like the house was holding its breath, waiting to see if I was smart enough to look in the right corners. I did not go to the sunroom. Instead, I walked straight to the cupboard under the main staircase. It was a small, cramped space, hidden behind a panel that looked like part of the wainscoting. When I was a child, this had been my sanctuary. It was the only place in Willowcrest Hall that was not staged for public consumption. It smelled of cedar and old dust, and the faint metallic tang of the vacuum cleaner that the housekeeper stored there. But behind the vacuum and the boxes of winter coats, there was a small hollow space where a skinny 13-year-old girl could curl up and disappear. I pulled the door open, the hinges winded, a sound I had not heard in over a decade. I pushed aside a heavy wool coat that smelled like mothballs and knelt down on the floorboards. It was exactly where I had left it. Tucked into the corner, wedged between the wall and a box of Christmas ornaments, was a moss-green sketchbook. My heart gave a strange, painful lurch. I reached out and pulled it free. The cover was faded, the edges soft and curling from years of being handled by nervous, sweaty hands. I ran my thumb over the textured paper. This book was the repository of the Ella I had been before they edited me. I sat down right there on the floor of the hallway, cross-legged, and opened it. The pages were filled with charcoal and graphite drawings. They were sketches of houses, but they were not houses like Willowcrest Hall. They were not symmetrical, imposing colonial mansions with perfect pillars and manicured lawns. They were strange, whimsical things. I had drawn cottages with crooked chimneys, modern glass cubes suspended over waterfalls, tree houses that spiraled up into the canopy like DNA helices. They were messy. They were creative. They were full of life. I remembered the day I stopped drawing them. I was 17. I had shown this book to my mother, trembling with pride, telling her I wanted to apply to architecture school. I wanted to build things. I wanted to create spaces where people could feel safe, not just impressed. She had looked at the book for exactly 10 seconds. Then she had closed it, handed it back to me, and said, "Do not waste your life on daydreams. Ella, you are going to study finance. Architects are service providers. We are the ones who hire them." That was the day the artist died and the consultant was born. I flipped through the pages, feeling a wave of grief for that girl who had just wanted to make something beautiful. And then, as I turned the page past a sketch of a library with a glass roof, a piece of paper fluttered out. It landed on the hardwood floor face up. It was a letter on thick official stationery. The letterhead was embossed in navy blue ink. Northbridge School of Design. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered Northbridge. It was the only design school I had secretly applied to, forging my mother's signature on the application fee check. I had waited months for the reply, and when it finally came, my mother had met me at the door. Holding the envelope, she had told me with a look of pity that I now recognized as condescension, that I had not made the cut. She said I had failed the final portfolio review. She said it was a kindness that I did not get in because I would have struggled among the real talent. I picked up the letter. My hands were shaking. I read the first paragraph. "Dear M. Scott, we are writing to acknowledge your correspondence regarding the incoming fall semester. While we are incredibly impressed with your portfolio and we're looking forward to welcoming you as a scholarship recipient, We respect your decision to decline the offer. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Decline. I had never declined. I had never even seen the acceptance letter. They had offered me a scholarship. I had been good enough. I had been more than good enough. I had been scholarship material. I felt a hot, prickly sensation spread across my scalp. I flipped the letter over. On the back, scrolled in blue ink, was a note. It was my mother's handwriting. I would know those sharp, aggressive loops anywhere withdrawn per parent request. Student will be pursuing a business degree at Sterling University. And below it, her signature, Vivian Marlowe. She had intercepted the acceptance letter. She had written back to them pretending to be me, or at least acting on my behalf. And she had killed my dream before I even knew it was alive. She had looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't good enough, all while holding the proof that I was exceptional. I felt sick. I felt a rage so cold it burned. This was not just controlling. This was malicious. She had not just steered me toward finance. She had actively sabotaged my escape route. I was about to close the book, my mind reeling when I noticed something else tucked into the back pocket of the sketchbook. It was a small torn scrap of paper, looking like it had been ripped from a legal pad. I pulled it out. It was not my handwriting. It was my mother's again, but this time it was hurried, scribbled. It looked like a note she had written to herself while on a phone call, the kind of mindless doodling you do when you are listening to someone talk. There were just 2 lines. Marlowe Legacy Trust. Audit only if marriage triggers. I stared at the words. Marlowe Legacy Trust. I had never heard of it. I knew my parents had money. I knew there were investments, portfolios, diversified assets. I analyzed finances for a living. I understood how wealth was structured. But a name trust, a legacy trust specifically, that usually implied something set up by a previous generation, something locked away, something substantial. But it was the second line that made the hair on my arm stand up. Audit only if marriage triggers. I read it again. Audit only if marriage triggers. I sat there on the floor of the hallway, the silence of the house pressing in on me, and I tried to parse the sentence like a forensic accountant. Audit, an official inspection of an individual's or organization's accounts, typically by an independent body. Audits happen when there is a discrepancy or when a specific event mandates a review of the books. Only if marriage triggers. The word triggers was the key. In legal and financial terms, a trigger is an event that sets a clause into motion. My brain, finally waking up from the emotional coma of the last 24 hours, started connecting the dots. Why did my mother push me into finance? Maybe so I would be useful to the family business. Or maybe to keep me close, but definitely to keep me away from a career where I might be independent. Why did she despise Noah? She said he was common, but was that it? Or was it that Noah was smart? Noah was meticulous. Noah was the kind of man who read the fine print. And why cancel the wedding now? Why wait until 3 weeks before the date? Because the marriage was the trigger. If I got married, something would happen with this Marlowe Legacy Trust. And according to this note, that something involved an audit. And an audit is the last thing you want if you have something to hide. I looked at the word trust on the scrap of paper. It sat there innocent and heavy. Trust. It is a funny word. It means reliance on the integrity, strength, ability, shity of a person or thing. But in my world, in the world of the Marlowe, it meant a legal entity used to hold assets for a beneficiary. I realized in that moment, sitting in the dust of my childhood hiding spot, that I had been looking at the word wrong my whole life. I had spent 29 years trying to earn their trust. I had tried to be the trustworthy daughter. I had tried to be the one they could believe in. But all this time, trust was not a feeling. It was a noun. It was a pile of money. And it was a pile of money that they were terrified I would find out about. I felt a sudden wave of clarity that was almost dizzying. My mother did not cancel the wedding to save the family brand. She can let it to stop the audit. She can let it because if I walked down that aisle and signed a marriage license, some banker somewhere was going to open a file, look at the numbers, and realize that the math did not add up. She was not protecting me from a bad marriage. She was protecting herself from a felony. I closed the sketchbook, trapping the rejection letter and the scrap of paper inside. I held it against my chest. Felt heavy, heavier than paper and cardboard should feel. Felt like I was holding a weapon. I stood up. My knees cracked. I brushed the dust off my skirt. I looked around the hallway one last time. The pristine white walls, the gleaming chandelier, the portraits of our ancestors staring down with arrogant disinterest. It was all a facade. This whole house, this whole life was a stage set designed to distract the audience from what was happening backstage. I walked out of Willow Rest Hall with the sketchbook under my arm. I did not take the fabric samples. I did not take the vendor contracts. I took the evidence. On the drive back to my apartment, I kept thinking about that word trust. My mother had taught me that trust was something you gave to family unconditionally. She had taught me that questioning your parents was a betrayal. She had weaponized the concept of loyalty to keep me blind. But as I turned onto the main road, accelerating past the speed limit, I realized the truth. There are two kinds of trust. There is the kind you feel in your heart, and there is the kind you sign on a document. They had broken the first one a long time ago, and the second one, the Marlowe Legacy Trust. I had a feeling they had broken that one, too, and I was going to find out exactly how much it cost them to do it. That afternoon, the sky over Briarford finally opened up, letting loose a torrential downpour that hammered against the single window of my living room. It was the kind of rain that washes the city gray, turning the streets into slick mirror-like surfaces reflecting the brake lights of cars going nowhere. I was sitting on my couch, the green sketchbook from the cupboard under the stairs resting on my lap like a heavy stone tablet. When a knock rattled my front door, I knew it was Noah before I even opened it. He has a specific knock, 3 rapid taps followed by a pause, a rhythm he has used since our third date. When I pulled the door open, he was standing there soaked to the bone. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and water was dripping from the hem of his jacket onto my welcome mat. But I did not look at his face first. I looked at what he was holding. In his arms, clutched tight against his chest to shield it from the rain, was a large sodden cardboard box. It was one of those banker boxes we had used to organize our life together, usually reserved for tax returns or old photos, but I knew what was in this one. I stepped back to let him in. He did not say hello. He did not try to kiss me. He walked straight into the living room and set the box down on the coffee table with a heavy thud. The bottom was wet, leaving a dark ring on the wood, but neither of us moved to wipe it up. If they are going to cancel the wedding, Noah said, his voice rough, then I want to see exactly what they touched. He stripped off his wet jacket and threw it over the back of a chair. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes that I had not noticed 2 days ago. He looked like a man who had been trying to solve a complex coding error for 48 hours straight, only to realize the bug was in the hardware itself. What is this? I asked, nodding at the box. The skeleton, he said. I went to the apartment. I printed out everything. Every email chain, every invoice, every contract stored in our shared drive. I called the vendors who would talk to me. This is the autopsy, Ella. He sat down on the floor, ignoring the couch, and gestured for me to join him. It was a challenge. He was telling me that we could not just sit around feeling the phantom limb pain of a severed future. We had to look at the wound. We needed to know the truth, not just feel the pain. I slid off the couch and sat opposite him. Between us lay the box, a cardboard tomb for a day that would never happen. We started unpacking it piece by piece. First came the catering contract, $10,000 deposit, non-refundable. The document listed the menu we had agonizingly chosen. Herb-crusted lamb, wild mushroom risotto. I saw my name printed clearly at the bottom. Client Ella Scott. Next was the floral agreement with Lucia Events. $5,000. White hydrangeas and trailing ivy. Again my name Ella Scott. Then the band, the lighting technicians, the rental company for the chairs. Every single piece of paper was a testament to the fact that this was my event, my liability, my dream. My parents were listed only as financial contributors on a separate writer, meaning they held the purse strings. But legally, I was the one on the hook. We worked in silence for 20 minutes. The only sound the rustling of paper and the rain beating against the glass. And then Noah pulled out a staple-bound document from the bottom of the stack. It was the contract for Rosebridge Manor. Rose was the crown jewel. It was a historic estate 2 hours north of the city. A place booked 18 months in advance. Securing it had felt like a miracle. Losing it felt like a tragedy. Noah flipped past the initial agreement, past the liability clauses to the very last page. He froze. Ella, he said, his voice was quiet, dangerously calm. Look at this. He spun the document around and slid it across the table toward me. It was a page titled Cancellation and Release of Date Form. My eyes scanned the text. It stated that the client was voluntarily releasing the date of October 14th, forfeiting the deposit of $15,000 and absolving the venue of any further obligation. And at the bottom of the page was a signature. Ella Scott. I stared at it. The ink was black. The loops were large. It spelled my name, but it made my stomach turn over. That is not my signature, I whispered. Noah leaned forward, his eyes intense. I know. Look at the S in Scott. You write your S with a sharp loop at the top. This one is round. And look at the pressure marks. Whoever wrote this hesitated. See the little ink blot at the end of the A. They paused. They were thinking about how to shape the letter. I reached out and touched the paper. Felt cold. This is dated 3 weeks ago. September 2nd. September 2nd. Noah repeated. 3 weeks before your mother called you to Willow Crest Hall. I grabbed my phone. My hands were trembling so hard I almost dropped it. I dialed the number for Rosebridge Manor. I did not care that it was 5 o'clock in the evening. I prayed someone was still in the office. On the third ring, a woman answered. Rose Manor, Events Department. This is Ella Scott, I said. My voice sounded strange, tight and high. I need to speak to the manager immediately. There was a pause. Ms. Scott. Oh, hello. I thought everything was settled with your account. I am looking at a cancellation form, I said, cutting her off. I need to know how you received this. The woman on the other line hesitated. I could hear her typing on a keyboard. One moment, let me pull up the file. Yes, here it is. We received the signed cancellation form via email on September 2nd at 2:15 in the afternoon. We followed up with a confirmation call at 2:30 to verify per our policy for cancellations within 90 days. You spoke to me? I asked. The room seemed to tilt. Well, yes, the woman said, sounding confused and a little defensive. I spoke to you, or well, I spoke to the bride. You confirmed the cancellation. You said you were facing some personal challenges and needed to release the date immediately to avoid the next installment payment. What did the voice sound like? I asked. I beg your pardon. The woman you spoke to? I pressed, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Did she sound like me? Did she sound like I sound right now? There was a long silence on the line. She sounded upset. She was crying a little. Her voice was lower than yours is now. Maybe, but she verified the last 4 digits of the social security number on file and the booking reference. We had no reason to doubt it. Send me the email, I said. Forward me the email that the form was attached to right now, please. I can do that, she said, her tone cooling. She sensed trouble sending it to the email on file. No, I said. Read me the email address it came from. It was sent from, let me see, Ella. Smaro home account. Come. I felt the blood drain from my face. I lowered the phone slowly, not even bothering to say goodbye, and pressed the end call button. What is it? Noah asked. The email, I said, looking up at him. It came from Ella Smarlow account. Calm. Noah frowned. I have never seen you use that address. Is that an old account? It is not mine, I said. It is the family admin account. I stood up and walked to the window, needing to look away from the papers. My mother, in her obsession with organization and control, had set up a private domain for the household 10 years ago. Marlow Home. It was used for paying bills, scheduling maintenance for the estate, communicating with the staff. Each family member had an alias routed to the main server, which my mother controlled. I had not logged into that system since I moved out at 22. I had assumed my alias was deactivated. Apparently, it had been kept active for exactly this kind of utility. They used the internal family server, I said, turning back to Noah, because they knew I would never see the sent folder. My mother manages that domain personally. I looked at the date again. September 2nd. Noah, I said, my mind racing. Do you have the call logs? You said you pulled everything. I pulled our logs, Noah said, reaching into the box. But I also pulled the family plan data. You are still on their plan, Ella. You never switched over. He pulled out a thick stack of spreadsheets. He was an engineer. Of course, he had the raw data. He flipped through the pages, his finger tracing the lines of timestamps and durations. September 2nd, he muttered. Around 2:30 in the afternoon, he stopped. His finger hovered over a line item. Here, he said, outgoing call. Duration 15 minutes. Destination. Rose Manor. Whose line? I asked. I felt like I was going to throw up. Noah looked up at me. His face was grim. It was not your mother's line. It was Belle's. The room fell silent. The only sound was the rain drumming against the glass. Louder now, like 1,000 tiny fists demanding entry. Belle, my younger sister, the one who had sat on the chaise lounge looking bored, the one who had said, better luck next time. I closed my eyes and reconstructed the timeline. September 2nd. That was a Tuesday. My mother had texted me at 3 o'clock that day, asking if I was free the following weekend. It had seemed like a casual check-in, but at 2 o'clock, an hour before she texted me, she had already instructed someone to email the cancellation form. And at 2:30, Belle had picked up the phone, dialed the venue, and pretended to be me. She had probably put on a sad, shaky voice. She had verified my social security number, which she knew because our parents kept all our documents in the safe. She had led my wedding while sitting in her bedroom, probably checking her Instagram feed at the same time. It was coordinated. It was a tactical strike. I walked back to the table and picked up the cancellation form. I reached into my purse and pulled out my driver's license. I placed it on the table next to the forgery. We looked at them side by side. My real signature is fluid. It is the signature of someone who signs a lot of documents for work. It is fast, efficient, with a distinctive slant to the right. The signature on the form was careful. It was drawn, not written. The lines were shaky, as if the hand holding the pen was moving slowly, trying to mimic a shape rather than express a name. The pressure was uneven. It was a bad copy. To a stranger, it might pass. But to anyone who knew me or to anyone looking closely, it was obviously fake. That is a forgery, Noah said. He did not say it like a question. He stated it like a fact. They faked my signature, I said, the words tasting metallic in my mouth. They impersonated me on the phone. They used a private email server to hide the paper trail. This is not a misunderstanding, Ella, Noah said. He stood up and walked around the table to stand next to me. He did not touch me, but his presence was a solid wall of heat at my back. A misunderstanding is forgetting to invite a cousin. A misunderstanding is arguing about the budget. This is fraud. This is identity theft. I looked at the papers. I looked at the evidence of my family's betrayal. It was not just that they wanted to stop the wedding. It was the lengths they had gone to. They had committed crimes. They had involved my sister in a conspiracy. They had looked at me, smiled at me, and lied to my face for 3 weeks while the venue was already released to someone else. Why? I asked, though I knew the answer. Why go this far? Why not just tell me they were cutting me off? Because if they told you, Noah said, his voice low, you might have found a way to pay for it yourself. Or we might have eloped, or we might have kept the date and downsized. They needed the date canceled. They needed the contract voided. They needed the event to cease to exist. He was right. If they had just pulled the funding, I would have fought. I would have taken out a loan. I would have married him in a backyard. But by canceling the venue behind my back, by releasing the date, they ensured that the wedding could not happen on the timeline that triggered the audit. They had not just cut the money, they had scorched the earth. Noah reached out and took my hand. His palm was warm. Ella, listen to me. I looked up at him. His eyes were clear, focused. The exhaustion was still there, but behind it was a steel resolve I had never seen before. I know a lawyer, he said. Her name is Harper Quinn. We went to college together. She is not a corporate shark. She specializes in civil litigation. She handles messy situations. People usually hire her when things go wrong with business partners, but she knows family law too. I pulled back slightly. A lawyer, Noah? Are you saying we should sue my parents? I am saying we need advice, Noah said firmly. I am saying that your mother just committed a felony to stop you from getting married. I am saying that they forged your name on a legal contract. This is not about revenge, Ella. This is about protection. If they are willing to do this, what else have they signed your name to? What else have they done with your identity? The question hung in the air. What else? I thought about the green sketchbook. I thought about the scholarship rejection letter I had never seen. I thought about the Marlowe Legacy Trust. If they could forge my signature to end my happiness, could they forge it to steal my money? Could they forge it to take control of the assets my grandfather left me? The answer was sitting right there on the coffee table in black ink. Caller, I said. Noah nodded. He did not smile. He just pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. I am not doing this to hurt them, I said mostly to myself, staring at the fake signature that looked so much like mine and yet nothing like me. I know, Noah said, bringing the phone to his ear. You are doing this to stop them from hurting you. Outside, the rain intensified, hammering against the roof like applause. The circus was closed, but the courtroom was just about to open. The law office of Harper Quinn was located on the second floor of a converted brownstone in the older part of Briarford. It was not one of those glass and steel firms where the reception desk is made of marble and the silence costs $500 an hour. It was a small, functional space that smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, and every surface was covered in stacks of manila folders. Yet there was a strange order to it. It felt like the inside of a brain that had made peace with chaos. Harper herself was nothing like the lawyers I had seen on TV. She was in her early 30s, wearing a simple navy blazer over a gray t-shirt. She had sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to assess everything without judging anything. When Noah introduced us, she did not offer me a sympathetic tilt of the head. She just shook my hand firmly and pointed to a chair. Noah says you have a contract problem that is actually a family problem, she said. sitting down behind her desk and opening a fresh legal pad. Start from the beginning. Do not edit. Just tell me what happened. So I did. I told her everything. I told her about the summons to Willow Rest Hall. I told her about the phrase, "We are not funding this circus." I told her about the understood that felt like a war cry. I told her about the cancellation form, the forged signature, the fake phone call from Belle, and the hidden email account. Harper listened with an intensity that was almost unnerving. She did not interrupt to offer comfort. She did not gasp when I mentioned my mother's cruelty. She just wrote. Her pen scratched across the yellow paper in short, rhythmic bursts. Occasionally, she would ask a question, her voice precise and surgical. The email domain, she asked at one point, is it hosted on a private server or a public one? Private, I said. My mother pays for it through her company. And the phone call log, she continued. Does it show the duration? 15 minutes, Noah answered. Long enough to go through security protocols, Harper muttered, making a note. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Harper capped her pen and leaned back in her chair. She looked at the stack of documents we had brought the skeleton of my dead wedding. Let me see the Rosebridge contract, she said. I slid the cancellation form across the desk. She picked it up, adjusted a desk lamp, and held the paper directly under the light. She squinted at the signature. See this, she said, pointing to the ink with the tip of her pen. The pressure is uneven. The ink pools at the start of the E and the S. That happens when someone is hesitating. When they are thinking about the shape of the letter rather than just writing it, and the color, it is a slightly different shade of black than the date written next to it. Different pen, probably signed at a different time than when the form was filled out. She looked up at me. This is a classic forgery. I see this in contested prenups all the time, but usually it is one spouse forging the other's name. It is rare to see a parent doing it to a child. She set the paper down and looked me in the eye. Ella, I need you to understand the legal reality of what you just described. Using a family email address to communicate is one thing, but logging in as you, sending a document that claims to be from you, and then having your sister verbally impersonate you to a third party to void a contract, that is not just family overstepping, that is criminal impersonation. That is fraud. I felt a chill run down my spine. Hearing it from Noah was one thing. Hearing it from a lawyer made it real. But why? I asked, my voice trembling. Why go to jail just to stop a wedding? That is the question, Harper said. People do not commit felonies for aesthetics. They do not do it because they think a groom is common. They do it to protect something valuable. I reached into my bag and pulled out the green sketchbook. I opened it to the back pocket and took out the small torn scrap of paper I had found in the cupboard. I found this, I said, sliding it across the desk. It was hidden in my mother's notes. Harper picked up the scrap. She read it aloud, her voice neutral. Marlowe Legacy Trust. Audit only if marriage triggers. She went still. Her eyes stayed fixed on the paper for a long beat. Then she looked up at me and her expression had changed. The professional detachment was gone, replaced by a sharp predatory focus. Ella, she said, do you know if you are the beneficiary of any trust? I shook my head. No, my parents always said they had savings for me, but they never mentioned a trust. They paid for college directly. I have never signed a trust document. Harper turned to her computer. I still have access to the internal banking database from a probate case I handled last year involving North River Bank, which is where most old money families in this county keep their assets. Let me check the public index. She typed furiously for a minute. Noah and I sat in silence watching her. The only sound was the clicking of keys and the hum of the hard drive. Here it is, Harper said softly. She turned the monitor so we could see. On the screen was a dense list of accounts. She pointed to a line item near the bottom. Marlowe Legacy Trust established 1993. Primary beneficiary Ella Scott. 1993. I whispered. That is the year I was born. It is a standard grantor trust, Harper explained, her eyes scanning the details. Probably set up by a grandparent. My grandfather, I said, he died when I was 5. Okay, Harper said. So, your grandfather sets this up. He puts assets in it for you. Usually, these trusts have an age trigger. You get access at 25 or 30, but sometimes they have a marriage trigger. The idea is that when the beneficiary gets married, the trust fully vests or it pays out a lump sum to help the new couple start their life. She clicked on a subtab labeled Transaction History. The screen refreshed. Most of the numbers were redacted with black bars, but the metadata was visible. I cannot see the total balance without a subpoena, Harper said, frowning. But look at the activity. She pointed to a series of outgoing transfers. 2 years ago, transferred to B. Marlowe Studio, $10,000. 3 months later, another $15,000 to the same account. That is Bell's Design Studio, I said, feeling a knot of nausea tighten in my stomach. She opened it 2 years ago. My parents said they gave her a startup loan from their personal savings. Harper scrolled down. Last year. Transfer to Charles Marlowe Personal. $50,000 memo house upgrades. They renovated the kitchen last year, I said. Marble countertops, imported tile. And here, Harper pointed to a transfer from 6 months ago. Transfer to Vivian Marlowe Business, $20,000. Memo, business emergency. She sat back in her chair and looked at me. Ella, these are not small amounts and they are leaving a trust that is supposed to be for your benefit. If your parents are the trustees, which they almost certainly are, they have a fiduciary duty to manage this money for you. They cannot use it to renovate their kitchen or bail out your sister's business, unless the trust deed specifically allows for family maintenance, which is rare for a legacy trust. She tapped the scrap of paper with the note about the audit. And this, she said, is the smoking gun. Audit only if marriage triggers. She looked at Noah, then back at me. Here is what likely happens, she explained. The trust deed probably says that when you get married, the bank is required to perform a marital audit. They have to account for every penny in the trust before they hand it over to you or convert it into a joint marital asset. It is a standard clause to protect the beneficiary from marrying a gold digger, ensuring the assets are clean before a spouse gets involved. So if I get married, I started the realization dawning on me like a sunrise over a wasteland. If you get married, Harper finished, the bank opens the books. They look at the last 10 years of transactions and they see that your parents have been treating your inheritance like their personal piggy bank. They see the transfers to Bell. They see the kitchen renovation. They see the business bailouts. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. And the bank would be legally required to report that misuse to you and potentially to the authorities. The room spun. I gripped the armrests of my chair. They stole from me, I said. My own parents. It looks that way, Harper said. And when the wedding date approached, they realized the audit was unavoidable. They could not put the money back because they probably spent it. So the only way to stop the audit was to stop the marriage. She looked at the forged cancellation form again. That is why they were so desperate. That is why they risked a felony. They were not canceling a party, Ella. They were destroying the evidence of a 10-year embezzlement scheme. I felt tears prick my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of shock. I thought about my mother standing by the fireplace, telling me Noah wasn't worthy. I thought about her calling my life a circus. She had projected everything. She was the one running a circus. She was the one who wasn't worthy. What do we do? Noah asked. He reached out and put a hand on my shoulder. His grip was tight, grounding me. Harper picked up her pen again. We need to confirm the terms of the trust. I can file a motion to compel discovery, but that alerts them immediately. It would be better if we could get a copy of the original trust deed from someone else first. Is there anyone in the family who might know about this? Someone your mother does not control. I thought about my family. My father was a ghost. Belle was an accomplice. My grandparents were dead. But then I remembered someone. My Aunt Jo, I said. Joanna Marlowe. She is my father's older sister. Are they close? Harper asked. No, I said, my mother hates her. She banned Jo from the house when I was 12. She told us Jo was toxic and untrustworthy. I haven't spoken to her in years. I looked at Harper, a bitter smile touching my lips. My mother said Jo was untrustworthy because she asked too many questions about money. Jo used to be an accountant. Harper raised an eyebrow. An accountant's sister-in-law who was banned for asking questions about money. That sounds promising. She lives in South Cove now. I said, about 3 hours away. I think she runs a bakery. Contact her, Harper said. Do not tell her everything yet. Just ask her if she knows anything about a trust your grandfather set up. If she was an accountant and if she was around in 1993, she might have been the one who helped set it up. Or at least she might know where the bodies are buried. Harper tore the top sheet off her legal pad and handed it to me. It was a list of next steps. 1. Secure original trust documents. 2. Download all family admin emails before they change the password. 3. Get a sworn affidavit from the Rosebridge manager. Ella, Harper said, her voice softening for the first time. If we go down this road, there is no U-turn. Once we file a suit to demand an accounting of that trust, you are declaring war on your parents. They will not just be mad, they will be exposed, and people with that much to lose fight dirty. I stood up. I looked at the forged signature one last time. I looked at the fake Ella Scott who had led her own happiness to save her mother's reputation. I was done being that version of Ella. They declared war first, I said. I am just returning fire. Good, Harper said. She stood up and shook my hand again. Call your aunt. Find out what she knows. And Ella, yes. Do not use your phone for that call. Use a burner or a payphone if you can find one. If they are monitoring your email, they might be monitoring your call logs too. I nodded. Understood. I walked out of Harper's office with Noah, stepping back into the rain. But the world didn't look gray anymore. It looked sharp. It looked clear. My mother had called Aunt Jo untrustworthy for years. Suddenly, being called untrustworthy by Vivian Marlowe sounded less like an insult and more like a badge of honor. I needed to talk to the only other person my mother had tried to erase. I sat in my car parked 2 blocks away from my apartment, connected to the Wi-Fi of a 24-hour coffee shop. Harper had warned me about digital surveillance, about the possibility that my parents were monitoring my home network, so I was not taking any chances. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets of Briarford glistening in black, reflecting the neon sign of the cafe. I balanced my laptop on my knees and dialed the number Harper had dug up for me. It rang for a long time. I almost hung up, thinking that maybe this was a mistake. Maybe the bridge had been burned too thoroughly to ever be crossed again. But then the screen flickered and a face appeared. It was a face I had not seen in 7 years. Aunt Jo looked older than I remembered. The last time I saw her, I was 22 and she was being escorted out of Willow Rest Hall by my father while my mother stood at the top of the stairs, looking down like a queen dismissing a peasant. Now Jo was sitting in what looked like a sunroom with a view of gray choppy water behind her. She was wearing a thick wool sweater and her hair, once dyed a fierce red, was now a natural steel gray tied back in a messy bun. Ella, she said. Her voice was raspy, the voice of a woman who has spent years shouting over the sound of the ocean. She squinted at the camera, adjusting her glasses. Is that really you? Hi, Aunt Jo, I said. My throat felt tight. I am sorry to call you out of the blue like this. She leaned back, her expression shifting from confusion to a weary sort of relief. I heard about the wedding, she said. News travels fast in families, even arranged ones. I assumed you were calling to tell me you are okay or to ask for a recipe, but seeing your face, you do not look okay, kid. You look like you are hunting. I did not have the energy for small talk. I found a sketchbook, I said, and a note. It said Marlowe Legacy Trust. Jo went very still. The warmth in her eyes evaporated, replaced by a sharp, knowing look that reminded me for a split second of my grandfather. She let out a short, dry laugh that sounded more like a cough. So, she said, shaking her head, they finally pushed you far enough to find it. I wondered how long it would take. I thought maybe you would stumble onto it when you turned 30, or maybe when Charles finally drank enough scotch to let something slip, but I guess Vivian got careless. It is real, then? I asked. It is not just some accounting term. Oh, it is real, Jo said. She picked up a mug of tea from the table beside her, her hands steady. It is very real, and it is the reason your mother has been looking over her shoulder since 1993. She took a sip and then looked straight into the camera lens. Your grandfather, Arthur, he was a hard man, but he was not blind. He knew your father was weak. He knew Charles would sign anything Vivian put in front of him just to keep the peace. And he knew Vivian well. He knew Vivian treated money like oxygen. She thinks she's entitled to breathe all of it. Jo leaned in. Arthur set up the Marlowe Legacy Trust specifically for you. You were the first grandchild. He wanted to make sure that no matter how many businesses your father ran into the ground, and no matter how much money your mother spent on maintaining that museum you call a house, you would be safe. He put a significant amount of assets into it. Stocks, bonds, some commercial real estate holdings. How much? I asked. In 1993, it was about $2 million, Jo said casually. With 30 years of compound interest and market growth, Ella, do the math. It is a fortune. I felt the air leave my lungs. I had been worrying about paying rent on my apartment. I had been worried about losing a $15,000 deposit on a venue. And all this time, there was a multi-million-dollar safety net that had been hidden from me. But why couldn't I access it? I asked. Why didn't I know? Because Arthur put conditions on it, Jo explained. He did not want you to be a spoiled brat. The trust was designed to vest, meaning you get full control upon one of two events. Either you turn 35 or you get legally married. Married? I whispered. Exactly, Jo said. Arthur was old-fashioned. He thought marriage meant maturity. He thought if you found a partner, you would need the capital to start a life, buy a home, maybe start a business of your own. But until one of those two things happened, the trust was to be managed by trustees. Your parents, she paused, her expression darkening. The trust deed gave them management rights starting when you turned 18. But there was a catch, a big one. They were allowed to withdraw funds only if the money was used for your direct benefit, education, health, housing, or if the money was used for something else. They needed your written consent, a signature, a paper trail proving you knew where the money was going. I never signed anything, I said. I never approved a single cent. I know, Jo said grimly, but the money left the account anyway. She stood up and walked out of the frame for a moment. I heard the sound of a file cabinet opening. She came back holding a sheath of papers. They looked old, yellowed at the edges. I used to be the accountant for the family businesses, Jo said, holding the papers up to the camera. Before your mother fired me, I kept copies, Ella. I always keep copies. She flipped to a page. This is from 5 years ago. Your father's logistics company was underwater. He made a bad bet on a shipping merger. He was looking at bankruptcy. Suddenly, a miracle occurred. $600,000 appeared in the company accounts, labeled as shareholder injection. She tapped the paper. That same week, $600,000 was withdrawn from the Marlowe Legacy Trust. The memo on the withdrawal family investment. She flipped another page. 2 years ago, Belle opens that fancy design studio of hers. $300,000 for leasehold improvements and inventory withdrawn from the trust memo. Educational expense. I felt sick. They paid for Belle's career with my money. They paid for everything with your money. Joe said the renovations on Willow Rest Hall. Your money. The vacations to the Amalfi Coast. Your money. They have been stripping that trust for part since the day you turned 18. They treated it like a private piggy bank that would never run out. But how did they think they would get away with it? I asked. Eventually, I would turn 35. They were banking on you being docile. Joe said they were banking on you being the good Ella. They thought that by the time you were 35, they would have either paid it back, which never happens, or they would guilt you into signing a retroactive release. They would cry. They would say they did it for the family and you would forgive them. That was the plan. But then I got engaged. I said, "Then you got engaged." Joe agreed. And that triggered the one thing your grandfather put in the trust that terrifies your mother more than wrinkles. The marital audit. She lowered the papers. Arthur insisted on it. He did not trust Vivian. He wrote it into the deed. Upon the marriage of the beneficiary, an independent third-party audit must be conducted to verify the integrity of the principal before transfer. It is mandatory. The bank cannot waive it. The trustees cannot waive it. If you get married, the bank has to open the books and send a full report to you, to your spouse, and to your lawyer. So if the wedding happened, Joe cut in, the bank would have printed out a report showing millions of dollars of unauthorized withdrawals. They would have seen the transfers to Belle. They would have seen the transfers to your father's failing companies, and they would have been legally obligated to report that theft to you. Your parents would not just be embarrassed, Ella. They would be liable. We are talking about civil lawsuits. We are talking about potential criminal charges for embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty. It all made sense now. The desperation, the coldness, we are not funding this circus. They weren't trying to save $50,000 on a wedding. They were trying to stop a forensic investigation that would send them to prison. They killed the wedding to stop the audit. I said it was self-preservation. And they tried to isolate you to keep you from asking questions. Joe added softly, "Remember when you were 22? I tried to call you. I tried to meet you for coffee. I wanted to tell you about the trust. Then I saw the first big withdrawal and I panicked. Mom told me you were jealous." I said, the memory washing over me with a fresh wave of shame. She said you were asking for money. She said you were trying to manipulate me because you were bitter about Dad's success. She told me to block your number for the good of the family. And you did, Joe said. She didn't say it with malice, just with a sad acceptance. I believed her, I said. "I am so sorry, Aunt Joe. I let them take you away from me. They are good at what they do, Ella." Joe said Vivian is a master at painting the world to look exactly how she wants it. She stole your money. Yes, but what she really stole was your ability to trust anyone who wasn't her. She stole your instincts. I wiped a tear from my cheek. I was done crying for the wedding. Now I was crying for the years of blindness. I was crying for the relationships they had severed to protect their secrets. "I have something else," Joe said. Her voice was harder now. "I still have a contact at the bank. An old friend who doesn't like your mother very much. When I saw the wedding was canceled, I asked him to take a quick look at the recent activity." She held up her phone to the camera. It was a photo of a computer screen. Blurry, but legible. "This transaction is dated 3 weeks ago," Joe said. "The same week your mother called you to cancel the wedding." I squinted at the screen. It showed a transfer of $75,000. "Where did it go?" I asked. Directly to an account named V. Marlowe Personal, Joe said. Not the joint account, not the business account, her private account. She paid herself, I said, stunned. She probably needed liquid cash to pay off vendors to keep quiet. Or maybe she just panicked and wanted to grab what she could before you started asking questions, Joe said. But here is the kicker, Ella. Here is the part that gives you the power. Joe leaned forward, her face filling the screen. The trust deed has a removal clause. It says that if the trustees are found to be acting in bad faith or if they misappropriate funds, the beneficiary, that is, you can petition the court to have them removed immediately and not just removed. The clause states that control of the trust bypasses the age restriction and hands full authority to the beneficiary to prevent further loss. My heart hammered against my ribs. You mean I can take control of the trust now? If you can prove they stole from it, Joe said. And with the audit, proving it is the easy part. You can strip them of their power, Ella. You can freeze their access. You can force them to pay back every single dime they took, even if it means they have to sell Willow Rest Hall to do it. She set her mug down. The ocean behind her was getting dark. The waves crashing against the shore with a relentless rhythm. So here is the question, Joe said. Her voice was gentle now, but heavy with expectation. You are at a crossroads, kid. You can walk away. You can let them keep the money, keep the control, and keep pretending they are the perfect family while you live in a small apartment and wonder what if. That is the safe choice. That is the choice the good Ella would make. She paused. Or, she said, you can let the truth do what your grandfather designed it to do. You can let the audit happen. You can burn the circus down and build something real from the ashes. But if you do that, you have to be ready to watch them fall. You have to be ready to be the one who pushes the button. I looked at my aunt. I looked at the woman who had been exiled for telling the truth. I thought about Noah analyzing contracts in the rain. I thought about the forged signature. I thought about my mother's flawless, frozen face as she told me I wasn't stable enough to be happy. I wasn't protecting them anymore. I was done being the collateral damage in their vanity project. Send me the documents, Aunt Joe. I said. Send me everything you have. Joe smiled. It was a fierce, proud smile. Check your encrypted email, kid. I sent them 5 minutes ago. I closed the laptop. The car was dark. But my mind was blazing with light. I had the motive. I had the evidence. And now I had the weapon. My mother wanted to talk about funding. Fine. We were going to talk about funding. But this time I was going to be the one auditing the books. I spent that night staring at my coffee table as if it were an altar where a sacrifice had to be made. On the left side lay my engagement ring. The diamond caught the stray light from the street lamps outside, glittering with a promise of a future I had desperately wanted. It represented Noah, warmth, and a life built on choosing each other every single day. On the right side lay the stack of papers Aunt Joe had sent me, the trust statement, the forged cancellation form, the scholarship rejection letter from a decade ago. These papers represented a past I had never understood. A web of lies that had been spun around me so tight I had mistaken it for a safety blanket. I sat there until 3 o'clock in the morning, unable to close my eyes. Noah stayed awake with me. He did not push. He sat on the floor, leaning against the couch, his hand resting on my knee. Around 4 o'clock, when the silence became too loud, he spoke. I do not care about the wedding, Ella. He said softly. We can go to the courthouse tomorrow. We can wait 5 years. We can never sign a piece of paper and just live together in a cabin in the woods. I am ready to marry you in any version of reality. He squeezed my knee and his voice hardened just a fraction. But I will not marry a woman who is still being strangled by her family. I cannot build a life with you if half of you is still trapped in that house trying to please people who steal from you. You have to choose. Not between me and them, but between the truth and the lie. I know, I whispered. If you walk away from this, Noah said, looking me dead in the eye. If you let them keep the money and the control just to keep the peace, then they own you, and I do not want to be a tenant in a life they own. His words hit me like a splash of ice water. He was right. If I did not face them now, if I did not drag this ugly, writhing truth out into the light, I would never really leave Willow Rest Hall. I would just be on a very long leash. By the time the sun rose, turning the sky a pale, sickly yellow, I had made my decision. I showered. I dressed in a sharp black blazer and trousers, my armor. I did not put the engagement ring back on. I put it in its velvet box and slipped it into my pocket. Then I gathered the evidence into a neat stack. I drove to Willow Rest Hall alone. It was 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning. I knew the schedule. My mother would be in her study answering emails or taking virtual consultations. My father would be reading the Wall Street Journal in the sunroom, pretending to understand the markets he had failed to conquer. Belle would be surfacing for her first coffee. I walked through the front door without knocking. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, looked up from her dusting in surprise. "Miss Ella," she said, "your mother is in a meeting." "Not anymore," I said. I walked past her, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. I went straight to the double doors of my mother's study and pushed them open. Vivian was sitting behind her massive mahogany desk. She looked up annoyed, her finger hovering over her mouse when she saw it was me. Her expression softened into a practiced mask of concern. "Ella," she sighed, taking off her reading glasses. "I am glad you came. I assume you have cooled down and are ready to discuss how we move forward with the cancellation." "Call Dad," I said. "And Belle, get them in here." "Excuse me." Her eyebrows shot up. "I am working." "Get them in here," I repeated. My voice was not loud, but it had a frequency I had never used before. It was the voice of someone who was holding a grenade and had already pulled the pin. Or I call the police and have them come here instead. My mother froze. She stared at me for a long 5 seconds, assessing the threat. She saw something in my face that made her pick up the landline. "Charles Bell, come to the study now." She hung up and folded her hands on the desk. "You are being dramatic, Ella. It is unbecoming." I did not answer. I walked to the 2 guest chairs opposite her desk and sat down in one. I placed my stack of papers in the center of the desk, right on top of her pristine leather blotter. 2 minutes later, my father and sister drifted in. Charles looked nervous, tugging at his collar. Belle looked bored, wearing a silk robe and holding a mug of green juice. "What is this about?" Belle asked, flopping onto the sofa. "I have a facial at 11. "Sit down, Dad," I said. Charles sat. I looked at the 3 of them. My family, the council. "I know about the Marlowe Legacy Trust," I said. The room went completely silent. It was as if I had sucked all the oxygen out of the space. My father's face went gray. Belle stopped swirling her juice. My mother, however, did not flinch. She just blinked once slowly. "I do not know what you are talking about," Vivian said. "You are confused." "I am not confused," I said. I reached out and tapped the top document on the pile, the bank statement Aunt Jo had sent me. "I know grandfather established it in 1993. I know it holds over $2 million in assets, and I know that for the last 10 years you have been treating it like an open buffet." "That is family money," my mother said, her voice tight. "It is a complex financial instrument. You do not understand how these things work." "I understand enough," I said. "I understand that you bought the new kitchen with it. I understand you bailed out Dad's shipping company with it. And I understand that you funded Belle's studio with $300,000 of my inheritance." I looked at Belle. She shrank back against the cushions. "You knew?" I asked her. Belle stammered. She looked at Mom, then at me. Mom said it was just investment capital. She said, "The family has a pot of money and we all use it when we need it." She said, "You were fine. You had your little job. You had Noah. You lived in that cheap apartment. I didn't think you needed it." "You didn't think I needed my own money?" I asked, feeling a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat. "So you took it?" "I didn't take it," Belle cried, defensive now. "Mom transferred it. I just signed the receipt." "Quiet, Belle." My mother snapped. Vivian stood up. She walked around the desk and leaned against the edge. Crossing her arms, she tried to loom over me, a tactic that had worked since I was a toddler. "Ella, listen to me. We are a family. We share resources. Yes, there is a trust, but managing assets is difficult. We had some liquidity issues. We borrowed against the principle to keep the family afloat, to keep this house, to keep your father's reputation intact. Would you have preferred we go bankrupt?" "I would have preferred you asked me," I said. "But you didn't ask, you forged." I slid the next paper forward, the cancellation form for Rosebridge Manor. "You forged my signature to cancel my wedding," I said. "And you did it because of the clause. Audit only if marriage triggers." When I said the words marital audit, the mask finally cracked. My mother's eyes widened slightly. The color drained from her cheeks. She realized I wasn't guessing. She realized I had seen the deed. "It was a misunderstanding," she said quickly. "We were protecting you." "Noah is stop." I cut her off. "Do not say his name. You were terrified that if I got married, the bank would open the books. You knew the audit would show every single dollar you stole. That is why you sent the email from the family admin account. That is why Belle pretended to be me on the phone." I looked at my father. "Did you know, Dad? Did you know they committed a felony to stop the wedding?" Charles looked at his hands. Vivian said she said it was for the best. She said if the audit happened, everything would collapse, the business, the house. She said we just needed more time to put the money back. We were going to put it back. My mother insisted. We just needed a few good quarters. "The market has been volatile. You have been taking money out for 10 years, I said. "You were never going to put it back. You ungrateful child." My mother hissed, her calm facade shattered. She took a step toward me, her face twisting into a scowl I had only ever seen directed at servants or Aunt Jo. "We gave you everything. We raised you in this house. We paid for your education. And now you want to destroy us over some technicality, over some paperwork." "It is theft, Mother," I said. "It is not paperwork. It is theft. If you drag this into court," she spat, pointing a manicured finger at my face, "you will humiliate this entire family. Do you know what people will say? They will laugh at us. They will say the Marlowe are broke. They will say you are a vindictive little brat who is suing her own parents. Your grandfather would be ashamed of you. Grandfather wrote the clause." I shouted back, my voice finally rising. "He wrote the audit clause because he knew you. He knew you would do exactly this." The room fell silent again. My mother was breathing hard. She realized intimidation wasn't working. So, she switched tactics. She smoothed her skirt. She took a deep breath. She forced a smile onto her face, a terrifying jagged thing. "Okay," she said. "Okay, Ella, you made your point. You are angry. I get it." She walked back to her chair and sat down. She clasped her hands. "Let us make a deal," she said. "We can fix this. We do not need lawyers. We do not need audits. I am listening." I said, "I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the price of my soul. You break up with Noah." She said, "He is the catalyst for all of this. He is the one putting these ideas in your head. You leave him. You cancel the wedding permanently. You wait, let us say 3 years. Give us 3 years to liquidity some assets and replenish the trust." She leaned forward. If you do that, we will rewrite the trust terms. We will give you a larger allowance. We will make sure you are comfortable, but the marriage cannot happen. Not now and not to him. I stared at her. She was not offering to pay me back. She was not offering to apologize. She was offering a bribe. She was asking me to sell the love of my life in exchange for a promise that they would stop stealing from me eventually. And if I refuse, I asked, then you are on your own, she said coldly. We will fight you. We will drag your name through the mud. We will tell everyone you are mentally unstable. I am a therapist. Ella, who do you think the judge will believe? The respected doctor or the hysterical daughter? I looked at Belle. She was looking at her phone, avoiding my gaze. I looked at Charles. He was shrinking into his chair. A man made of paper. I realized then that they were not my family. They were a corporation that was trying to liquidate a liability. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. It was the calm of a soldier who realizes the diplomacy is over and the only way out is through the fire. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I placed it on the table face up. The screen was bright. The red timer was counting. Recording 14:32. My mother's eyes dropped to the phone. She saw the red dot. She saw the waveform moving as she breathed. You recorded this, she whispered. Every word, I said. The confession about the forgery, the admission of the theft, the blackmail attempt to make me leave Noah. It is all there. I picked up the phone and stopped the recording. I hit save. Then I hit upload to cloud. That is illegal, my mother said, her voice shaking. You cannot record us in our own home. Actually, I said, standing up and smoothing my blazer. In this state, as long as one party to the conversation consents to the recording, it is legal and I consented. I gathered my papers. I put the bank statement, the forgery, and the letter back into my folder. I came here to see if there was anything left to save. I said, I came here hoping you would say you were sorry. I hoped you would say you would mortgage the house to pay me back. I hoped you would act like parents. I looked at my mother one last time, but you just tried to buy me off with my own money. Ella, wait. My father stood up. Please sit down, Charles. My mother snapped, but her voice lacked its usual power. She looked pale. She looked at the phone in my hand like it was a loaded gun. I am leaving, I said, and the next time you hear from me, it will not be a text message. It will be a subpoena. I turned and walked out of the study. I did not slam the door. I closed it gently. I walked through the foyer, past the grand staircase where I used to hide, past the portraits of ancestors who probably would have been ashamed of all of us. When I stepped out into the fresh air, the sun was high overhead. I walked to my car, got in, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline crash hitting me hard. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of old leather and freedom. I pulled out my phone. I opened my messages and found Harper Quinn's name. I typed 2 sentences. I choose the truth, do what needs to be done. I hit send. I put the car in gear and drove down the gravel driveway. I did not look in the rear view mirror. I did not need to see the house to know that the foundation was already cracking. The weeks that followed were measured not in hours, but in the steady accumulation of paper. Harper Quinn was a machine. She was methodical, ruthless, and terrifyingly efficient. She fired off subpoenas like artillery shells, demanding call logs from Rosebridge Manor, email metadata from the server hosting company, and 10 years of transaction history from Norther Bank. Then came the day she slapped a thick file onto her desk in front of me. On the cover sheet in bold capitalized letters were the words Marlowe vs. Marlowe. I stared at it. I felt a wave of nausea roll through my stomach. Hot and acidic. It looked wrong. It looked unnatural. Surnames are supposed to bind people together, not stand on opposite sides of a legal versus sign. Seeing my name pitted against the people who gave it to me felt like looking at a broken bone protruding through the skin. A violation of the body's natural order. "We filed this morning," Harper said, her voice cutting through my hesitation. "The clock is ticking now. They have 30 days to respond." News in Briarford travels faster than light. By the time I got back to my apartment, my phone was lighting up with notifications from people I had not spoken to since high school. My mother was already ahead of the narrative. She was playing the victim with Oscar-worthy dedication. The story circulating at the country club and the charity luncheons was that poor Ella was having a mental breakdown. The story was that Noah was a manipulative, controlling outsider who was isolating me from my loving family and forcing me to sue them for money I did not deserve. I walked into the local grocery store to buy milk, and Mrs. Higgins, my mother's bridge partner, looked right through me as if I were a ghost. I realized then that my mother was not just fighting a legal battle. She was fighting a war for social survival. She was willing to burn my reputation to the ground to keep hers pristine. But the real attack did not come for me. Came for Noah. It was a Tuesday evening. Noah was in the kitchen of our apartment making pasta. He had been quiet all evening, his shoulders tense. His phone rang a blocked number. He looked at it, hesitated, and then let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, it rang again. He picked it up. I watched him from the living room. I saw his face go slack. I saw his knuckles turn white as he gripped the countertop. He didn't say much, just a series of yes and I understand. When he hung up, he stood there for a long time staring at the dark window. "Who was that?" I asked. He turned around. He looked pale. "Wrong number," he said. I knew he was lying. Noah is a terrible liar. He is too honest for his own good, but I was too tired to push him. I went to bed early, leaving him sitting at the kitchen island with a glass of water he didn't drink. The next evening, he came home early from work. He was holding a manila envelope. He looked like he hadn't slept. He walked into the living room where I was organizing the latest batch of discovery documents Harper had sent over and dropped the envelope on top of my pile. "I need to tell you something," he said. His voice was rough. I opened the envelope. Inside was a printed email. It was a job offer, or rather an invitation to interview for a senior architect position at one of the largest tech firms in the state. It was the kind of job Noah had dreamed about since college. The salary listed was nearly double what he made now. "This is amazing," I said, confused. "Why do you look like you are at a funeral?" "Look at the sender," Noah said. I looked. The email was from a recruitment firm called Vantage Point Executive Search. "I do not understand," I said. "The head of Vantage Point is on the board of directors for your father's shipping company," Noah said. "And last night, a man called me. He didn't give his name. He told me that I am a bright young man with a promising future. He told me that it would be a shame if personal entanglements made me unhireable in this city. He said that if I could help my fiancée see reason and drop this unfortunate lawsuit, opportunities would open up for me. He said if I didn't, doors would close." I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Noah, and for one terrifying, heartbreaking second, I doubted him. I looked at the offer. It was a golden ticket. It was stability. It was everything a man in his position would want. And I thought of my father. I thought of how Charles Marlowe had sold his spine piece by piece for 30 years in exchange for comfort and peace. I thought, this is it. This is where he leaves me. This is where the price gets too high. So I said, my voice trembling, "Are you going to take it?" Noah looked at me. He saw the doubt in my eyes. He saw the fear that I was about to be abandoned again. He reached out and took the paper from my hand. "Ella," he said. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he tore the letter in half. Then he tore the halves in quarters. He crumpled the pieces into a ball and threw them into the trash can by the desk. "I do not want a career that is built on selling you out," he said. His voice was steady, filled with a quiet rage I had never seen before. "I do not want their money. I do not want their favors, and I am not going to let them threaten me." He walked over and knelt in front of my chair, taking my hands in his. "They think everyone has a price because they have a price. They do not understand that some things are not for sale." I burst into tears. I cried because I was relieved, but mostly I cried because I realized how damaged I was. I had expected him to fail me. I had been trained to expect betrayal. Noah Holding Firm was the first time in my life a man had stood between me and the Marlowe machine and refused to move. The next week, the depositions began. Harper prepared me for 2 days straight. We sat in her office drinking lukewarm coffee while she drilled me. "They will try to make you emotional," she warned. "They will ask about your childhood. They will ask if you love your mother. They will try to paint you as an ungrateful daughter who is lashing out because she is stressed about a wedding. Do not apologize. Do not explain. Answer yes or no. Stick to the facts. The facts are our friends. Your feelings are their ammunition." The deposition took place in a glass-walled conference room at the opposing counsel's firm. It was sterile and cold. My mother sat at the far end of the long table, flanked by 3 lawyers in expensive suits. She looked impeccable in a cream-colored suit, her hair perfectly coiffed. She smiled at me when I walked in, a sad, pitying smile that made me want to scream. But I didn't scream. I sat down. I put my hands on the table, and I remembered Harper's rule. No apologies. Vivian went first, under oath with a videographer recording every tick and twitch. She played the role of the martyr beautifully. When Harper asked about the wedding cancellation, Vivian sighed. "I was worried about Ella," she said, her voice soft. She was spiraling. The planning was becoming obsessive. I thought she needed a break. I did it to protect her mental health. By forging her signature, Harper asked, sliding the document across the table. I signed it as her proxy, Vivian said smoothly. "In our family, we often handle administrative tasks for each other." It was not malicious. It was efficient. "And the phone call where your daughter Belle impersonated Ella," Harper pressed. "I cannot speak to that," Vivian said, taking a sip of water. "If Belle made a call, she was likely just trying to help execute the decision I made as the matriarch. She was unbreakable. She had an answer for everything. She spun every theft into a family investment, every lie into protection." Then Harper pulled out the big guns. Mrs. Marlowe, Harper said, "Are you aware of the clause in the 1993 Marlowe Legacy Trust deed regarding the marital audit?" Vivian's hand froze halfway to her water glass. "I am aware of the trust generally." "Are you aware?" Harper continued, reading from the document Aunt Jo had sent, that upon the marriage of the beneficiary, the bank is required to conduct a full forensic audit of all transactions over the preceding 10 years. Vivian stared at Harper. The warmth evaporated from her eyes. "I believe there is some boilerplate language to that effect." "And are you aware?" Harper said, looking up, "that on September 2nd, the same day you ordered the cancellation of the wedding, the trust balance was $1.4 million lower than the projected value based on market performance?" Vivian did not answer. Her jaw tightened. "Did you cancel the wedding to prevent the bank from discovering that missing $1.4 million? Harper asked. "Objection." Vivian's lawyer barked. "Speculation. I am asking for the witness's state of mind." Harper said calmly, "Did you know about the audit?" "Yes," Vivian whispered. It was the first time she sounded small. Next was Belle. "My sister did not have our mother's iron coating. She crumbled within 20 minutes. She sat in the chair looking like a terrified teenager, picking at her cuticles. When Harper showed her the email logs from the family admin account, Belle started to cry. "I just did what Mom told me," she sobbed. She said Ella was making a mistake. She said the wedding would ruin us. "I didn't know it was illegal to make the call. I just wanted everyone to stop fighting." "Did you know your design studio was funded with Ella's trust money?" Harper asked. "Mom said it was family money," Belle wailed. "She said Ella didn't need it because she had a job I didn't know." "But you saw the emails," Harper said. She pulled up a printout. "This email from you to your mother, dated 2 years ago. Subject, studio funds. You wrote, 'Are we sure we should use the trust? What if Ella asks?' And your mother replied, 'Call it the family trust in the books. She will never know.'" Belle went silent. She stared at the paper, her face streaked with mascara. She had known. She had asked and she had accepted the lie because it was convenient. But the final nail in the coffin came 3 days later. Harper called me into her office. She was grinning. It was a shark-like grin. "We got the server data." She said, "Your mother thought deleting emails from her inbox deleted them from the server. She was wrong." She handed me a single sheet of paper. It was an email from Vivian to Charles sent on August 30th, 3 days before the cancellation. Subject urgent. "Charles, I just spoke to the banker at Norther. He confirmed the audit is mandatory. There is no way around it. If she marries that boy in October, they are going to pull the last 10 years of records. They will see the transfers to the business. They will see the renovation costs. They will see everything. The audit will kill us all. We will lose the house. We could go to jail. The wedding has to stop. I do not care how we do it. I do not care if she hates us. It has to stop at all costs." I read the email 3 times. The audit will kill us all. There it was in black and white. It wasn't about Noah. It wasn't about the Marlowe brand. It wasn't about my mental health. It was a confession. They knew they were criminals and they were willing to destroy my life to cover their tracks. I lowered the paper. I felt a strange hollowness in my chest. I had spent my whole life thinking I was the problem. I thought I was too sensitive, too rebellious, too difficult, but I wasn't the problem. I was the evidence. Harper looked at me gently. "Ella," she said, "this is the smoking gun. With this email, we win. We can petition for immediate removal of trustees. We can force a forensic accounting. We can likely get a criminal referral if you want it." She paused. "But I need to ask you one last time. Are you sure? Once we enter this into the court record, it becomes public. The Marlowe name will be destroyed. Your parents will be paras. There is no going back to Sunday dinners after this." I walked to the window and looked out at the street. I watched people walking by, living their normal lives, trusting their families. I thought about the girl who used to hide in the cupboard under the stairs with a sketchbook. I thought about the woman who had driven away from Willow Rest Hall with tears in her eyes, believing she wasn't good enough. "Harper," I said, turning back to her, "I am not destroying my family." I picked up the email and placed it back on the desk. The family I thought I had never existed. I said it was just a corporation protecting its assets. "I'm just closing down a corrupt business." "Okay," Harper said. She closed the file. "Then we go to trial." The court date was set for November 14th. I went home and told Noah. We sat on the balcony of our apartment drinking cheap wine and looking at the city lights. "It is going to be ugly," I told him. "War usually is," he said. I looked at him. He had risked his career for me. He had stood by me when my own blood had turned against me. "I am scared," I admitted. "Not of losing, but of winning. If I win, I am an orphan." "No," Noah said. He reached out and took my hand, his thumb tracing the line of my knuckles. "If you win, you are free and you are not an orphan. Ella, you are the founder of a new line." You get to decide what the name Scott stands for. You get to build a house where no one lies and no one steals and no one hides in cupboards. I squeezed his hand. The circus was over. The tent had collapsed. The audience had gone home. Now it was just me standing in the center ring holding the match that would burn the rest of the rubbish to the ground. And for the first time in 29 years, I wasn't afraid of the fire. I was the fire. The Briarford County Courthouse was a building designed to make you feel small. It was a cavernous structure of gray stone and echoing marble floors, a place where the air was perpetually cold and smelled faintly of floor wax and old misery. The sound of my heels clicking against the floor tiles sounded like gunshots in a canyon. I walked in flanked by Harper and Noah. To my left, the press had gathered. In a small town like Briarford, a lawsuit titled Marlowe versus Marlowe was not just legal news. It was a social autopsy. The local reporters, people who had photographed me at charity galas and debutante balls, were now shoving microphones in my face, their camera lenses flashing like lightning. They were hungry for the spectacle of a daughter tearing down her own dynasty. Inside courtroom 4, the atmosphere was heavy. We took our seats at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, my family sat like a tableau of offended dignity. Vivian wore a navy suit, severe and impeccable. Charles sat next to her, staring at his hands. Belle was on the end, looking pale and terrified, chewing on her thumbnail. Their legal team was a phalanx of expensive suits, men who charged $600 an hour to defend the indefensible. Harper stood up to deliver her opening statement. She did not pace. She did not shout. She stood still, her voice clear and cutting. "Your Honor," Harper began, "this is not a case about a family dispute. This is not a case about a daughter who is unhappy with her parents' parenting style. This is a case about fraud. This is a case about forgery, about the misappropriation of over $1 million from a protected trust, and about a conspiracy to fabricate the cancellation of a wedding solely to prevent a mandatory financial audit." She paused, letting the words settle over the room. "We will show that Vivian and Charles Marlowe, acting as trustees, treated the Marlowe Legacy Trust not as a fiduciary responsibility, but as a personal slush fund." And when the plaintiff, Ella Scott, announced her engagement, an event that would legally trigger an independent review of those funds, the defendants panicked. They did not just ask her to cancel the wedding. They impersonated her. They forged her signature. They committed crimes to keep their secrets buried. The defense attorney, a slick man named Mr. Sterling, stood up to rebut. He smiled a condescending, oily smile. "Your Honor," he said, smoothing his tie, "the defense will show that this is a gross misunderstanding of complex family finances. The Marlowe family operates as a unit. Funds are fluid. Mrs. Vivian Marlowe, a respected pillar of this community, has always acted in the best interest of her daughter. The wedding was canceled because they feared for Ella's mental health and her stability. They were protecting her from a marriage she was not ready for. This lawsuit is nothing more than a tantrum funded by a confusion over how wealth management works. It was a good speech. If I did not know the truth, I might have believed him. But Harper had the receipts. She called her first witness and then moved immediately to the evidence. She did not start with the money. She started with the cover-up. "I would like to submit Plaintiff's Exhibit C." Harper said an email sent from Vivian Marlowe to Charles Marlowe on August 30th. The large screen on the wall flickered to life. The email was projected in high definition. I watched the jury, or rather the judge, since this was a bench trial, lean forward. Harper read the text aloud. "If she marries that boy this year, the audit will kill us all. The wedding has to stop at all costs." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. You could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Harper turned to Vivian, who was sitting at the defense table. Vivian was not looking at the screen. She was looking straight ahead. Her jaw set so tight I thought her teeth might crack. "Mrs. Marlowe," Harper said, addressing her directly as she took the stand a moment later. "When you wrote that the audit would kill us all, were you referring to physical death?" Vivian shifted in the witness chair. "Of course not. It was a figure of speech. I was under immense stress. The market was volatile. I was worried that an audit would be disruptive to our business operations." "Disruptive," Harper repeated. "Or revealing. Did you or did you not know that an audit would reveal over 10 years of unauthorized withdrawals?" "I was managing the family assets." Vivian snapped, her composure slipping. "I moved money where it was needed to keep the family afloat. That is what a mother does. That is not what a trustee does," Harper corrected sharply. Harper then moved to the next piece of evidence. The cancellation of Rosebridge Manor. "The defense claims that the cancellation was a family administrative decision," Harper said. "But we have the call log from the venue." She played the audio recording. The courtroom filled with the sound of a woman's voice. It was shaky, tearful, claiming to be Ella Scott, giving my social security number and begging to cancel the date. "I have a sworn affidavit from a forensic audio analyst," Harper said, holding up a document. While the call was placed from the cell phone belonging to Belle Marlowe, the voice analysis confirms a 99% match to the vocal cadence and pitch of Vivian Marlowe. I looked at Belle. She had her head in her hands. It hit me then. Belle hadn't made the call. She had unlocked her phone. Yes, she had dialed the number. But my mother, the control freak, the perfectionist, had taken the phone from her hand. She hadn't trusted Belle to act the part. Vivian had performed the role herself. She had impersonated her own daughter, using her other daughter's phone to destroy her eldest daughter's happiness. The manager of Rosebridge Manor took the stand and confirmed that the woman on the phone had sounded older, authoritative, but pretending to be distressed. Vivian looked down at her lap. The perfect mother mask was starting to melt, revealing the desperate operator underneath. Then came the numbers. Harper projected the bank statements from the Marlowe Legacy Trust. It was a massacre of red ink. October 14th, 2 years ago, Harper recited, transfer of $300,000 to B. Marlowe Studio. She looked at Belle, who was now on the stand, looking like she wanted to dissolve into the floor. "Beale," Harper asked gently, "did you know this money came from Ella's trust?" Belle was crying openly now. Her makeup was running down her face. "Mom said it was family money." She sobbed. "She said we have a family pot. She said Ella had a job and Noah, so she didn't need the help. She said I needed the help." "Did you ever ask if Ella had approved this transfer?" Harper asked. "I asked." Belle wailed. "I sent an email asking if we should tell Ella. And Mom said she said to call it Family Trust in the books so Ella would never know." "So you knew it was a secret?" Harper said. "I trusted my mother," Belle screamed. It was a sound of pure anguish. "I thought she was protecting us." Her admission hung in the air like smoke. She had just testified against her own mother. The defense table looked like a funeral. Then it was my father's turn. Charles Marlowe walked to the stand like a man marching to the gallows. He looked 10 years older than he had a month ago. "Mr. Marlowe," Harper said, "you are a co-trustee. You signed the authorization for a $50,000 withdrawal last year for home improvements. Did you ask Ella for permission?" "No," Charles whispered. "Speak up, please," the judge ordered. "No," Charles said, his voice cracking. "I did not." "Why?" Harper asked. "You knew the terms of the trust. You knew it required her signature." Charles looked at Vivian. For the first time in my life, I saw him look at her not with adoration but with fear and resentment. "Because Vivian told me to sign it," he said. She said if I didn't sign it, the business would go under. She said she would leave me if I didn't fix the cash flow problem. So, you stole from your daughter to save your marriage? Harper said, it wasn't a question. I thought I could put it back. Charles wept. I always thought I could put it back. He was not a villain. He was just a coward. But in that moment, I realized that a coward is just as dangerous as a villain because they let the villain in the door. Finally, they called Vivian back to the stand. She had regained some of her composure. She adjusted her pearls. She looked at me with cold, hard eyes. Mrs. Marlowe, Harper said, we have seen the emails. We have heard the audio. We have seen the bank statements showing funds going into your personal account. How do you explain this? Vivian lifted her chin. I am the CEO of this family, she said. Her voice was crisp. It was not the voice of a mother. It was the voice of a manager addressing shareholders. I made executive decisions. I reallocated assets to ensure the survival of the Marlowe brand. If the ship is sinking, you do not ask the passengers for permission to use the lifeboats. You act. Your daughter is not a passenger, Harper said, leaning in. She is the owner of the boat and you stole it. I raised her. Vivian snapped. I gave her life. I gave her that education. Anything she has is because of me. If I need to use the money to keep the roof over our heads, that is my right. It is not your right, Harper said. It is a felony. If Ella actually loved this family, Vivian sneered, looking directly at me. She would understand. She would not be dragging us through the mud for the world to see. She is selfish. She has always been selfish. The courtroom gasped. I sat there and I felt a strange sense of peace. There it was, the truth. She didn't see me as a person. She saw me as an asset. She saw me as a resource to be minded. And when I tried to leave, she saw me as a liability to be liquidated. She wasn't protecting me from Noah. She was protecting her supply. Harper sat down. No further questions, Your Honor. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair and glasses, looked over her spectacles at my parents. She looked at the weeping sister, the broken father, and the defiant mother. She cleared her throat. I have heard enough, the judge said. The evidence presented today is overwhelming. The documentation of the trust is clear. The evidence of misappropriation is clear. And the evidence of fraud regarding the cancellation of the wedding is frankly disturbing. She banged her gavel once. I am issuing an immediate temporary injunction, the judge ruled. All accounts associated with the Marlowe Legacy Trust are frozen effective immediately. Furthermore, I am freezing the personal assets of Vivian and Charles Marlowe pending a full independent forensic audit to determine the total extent of the liability. She looked at Vivian. Mrs. Marlowe, you are removed as trustee. Effective immediately. You are barred from accessing any family accounts until this court determines how much you owe your daughter. You cannot do that. Vivian stood up, her voice shrill. We have bills. We have appearances. Sit down, madam, the judge ordered, or I will hold you in contempt. You should be grateful I am not referring this to the district attorney for criminal charges this afternoon, though that may yet come. The gavel banged again. A final decisive sound. Court is adjourned. The room erupted. The press rushed toward the railing. My father put his head on the table. Belle was being comforted by a paralegal, but I just sat there. I looked at the screen where the numbers were still projected. The numbers that represented my grandfather's love and my parents' betrayal. The coffin was closed on the Marlowe family reputation. The judge had just nailed the lid shut. I stood up. Harper put a hand on my shoulder. Noah squeezed my hand. It is done, Noah said. Not yet, I said, looking at my mother, who was arguing frantically with her lawyer. They are frozen, but they are not finished. Now comes the audit. I walked out of the courtroom. The flashes of the cameras blinded me for a second, but I didn't look down. I walked straight through the crowd, my head held high. I had walked into that building as a daughter seeking answers. I was walking out as the owner of my own life. The circus was officially closed and I was the one holding the keys. The period that followed the temporary injunction was not the victory lap I had imagined. It was a waiting game and it was excruciating. For 6 weeks, the assets of the Marlowe family were frozen in a block of legal ice. A team of forensic accountants appointed by the court descended on the financial records of my parents like vultures on a carcass. I spent those weeks in a state of suspended animation. I went to work. I stared at spreadsheets for clients. And then I came home and stared at the wall. Every time my phone pinged with an email from Harper, my heart would hammer against my ribs. I was terrified that they would find a loophole. I was terrified that my mother, with her infinite capacity for manipulation, would find a way to charm the auditors or fabricate a document that exonerated her. But numbers, unlike parents, do not lie. The final report arrived on a gray Tuesday in December. Harper called me into her office to review it before the final hearing. She placed a thick spiral-bound document on the desk. It was heavy, felt like a brick. "It is worse than we thought," Harper said, her face grim. I opened the report. The executive summary was a catalog of betrayal. The accountants found that over the course of 11 years, more than 55% of the principal balance of the Marlowe Legacy Trust had been withdrawn. That is over 1,200,000. There were no consent forms. There were no signatures from me. There was no paper trail proving that I had authorized a single cent of it. The money had not gone to my education. It had not gone to my health. It had gone to lifestyle maintenance. It had gone to prop up my father's failing logistics company, which was bleeding money due to mismanagement. It had gone to completely remodel the east wing of Willow Rest Hall because my mother decided the FUNU was bad for her energy. It had gone to Belle's studio rent, her inventory, and even her personal credit card bills. Every luxury I had watched them enjoy. Every party they threw to impress the neighbors. Every vacation where they posted photos of themselves looking like royalty. It was all paid for by the inheritance my grandfather had left to ensure I would be safe. Harper filed the report with the court the next morning. Her motion was aggressive. She asked for 3 things. First, the permanent removal of Vivian and Charles Marlowe as trustees. Second, the immediate transfer of all remaining assets to my sole control. And third, a judgment requiring my parents to repay every single dollar they had misappropriated, even if it meant liquidating their personal assets to do it. The final hearing was scheduled for 3 days before Christmas. The courtroom felt different this time. The air was thinner. The bravado was gone. When I looked at the defense table, I almost didn't recognize my mother. Vivian Marlowe, the woman who would not be caught dead without perfect hair in a tailored suit, looked frayed. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, messy bun, and strands were escaping around her face. Her makeup was applied with a heavy hand, but it could not hide the gray exhaustion in her skin. She looked like a building that had been condemned, but was still refusing to fall down. My father sat next to her, staring at the table. He looked smaller, as if he were shrinking inside his expensive suit. Belle was not there. Her lawyer was present to represent her interests, but she had chosen to stay away. I did not blame her. Harper presented the findings with the clinical precision of a surgeon. She walked the judge through the timeline. In 2018, Harper said, pointing to a graph on the screen, a withdrawal of $80,000 was made. The memo says medical emergency, but the cross-reference with credit card statements shows that same week. A charge of $80,000 was made to a luxury travel agency for a tour of the Mediterranean. The judge, the same stern woman from the first hearing, narrowed her eyes. She looked at my parents. Mr. Sterling, the judge addressed their lawyer. Do you dispute these findings? Your Honor, Mr. Sterling said. Standing up, he sounded tired. My clients do not dispute the transactions. However, they maintained that the intent was never malicious. They viewed the family finances as a single ecosystem. They believed that by maintaining the family status, they were ultimately benefiting the beneficiary. By spending her money on a cruise, the judge asked dryly. By maintaining the social standing that allows the family to do business. Mr. Sterling argued weakly. Then my mother stood up. Mr. Sterling tried to grab her arm to stop her, but she shook him off. She walked to the podium. She gripped the wood with white knuckles. Everything I did, she said, her voice trembling. I did for her. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but they were pleading. Ella, look at me. We kept the house for you. We kept the business for you. We wanted you to have a legacy to come home to. I am your mother. I love you. I would never hurt you. 6 months ago, that speech would have worked. 6 months ago, I would have felt the guilt clawing at my throat. I would have felt like the ungrateful child she always said I was. But today I looked at the screen. I looked at the numbers. 1,200,000. Your Honor, my mother continued. I admit we were creative with the accounting. I admit we cut corners, but you cannot punish parents for trying to keep a roof over their child's head. The judge let the silence stretch out. It was uncomfortable. It was heavy. Mrs. Marlowe, the judge said finally. Her voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. Love is not a legal defense for embezzlement. Love does not grant you the right to forge a signature. Love does not allow you to impersonate your daughter to cancel her wedding because you are afraid of getting caught. The judge leaned forward. You speak of legacy, but the only legacy you have left your daughter is a crime scene. The law does not operate on sentiment, Mrs. Marlowe. It operates on facts, and the facts are that you stole from the very person you were sworn to protect. Vivian flinched as if she had been slapped. She stood there, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. The perfect mother narrative had finally collided with a wall that could not climb. The judge looked down at her papers. It is the judgment of this court, she began, that Vivian and Charles Marlowe have committed a gross breach of fiduciary duty. She read the verdict rapidly. First, the trust. I was granted immediate sole trusteeship of the Marlowe-Lisi Trust. My parents were permanently barred from accessing, managing, or even viewing the accounts. Second, restitution. The court ordered Vivian and Charles Marlowe to repay the sum of $1,240,000 to the trust within 24 months. To secure this debt, the court placed a lien on Willowcrest Hall and my father's remaining business assets if they could not pay. The house, the museum, the stage, the pride of my mother's life would be sold to satisfy the judgment. Third, Belle. Because she was a beneficiary of the stolen funds, but not a trustee, she was not held criminally liable. However, the judge ruled that the $300,000 invested in her studio was an unjust enrichment. Belle would have to sign a promissory note to the trust, repaying the principal over 10 years. Then the judge paused. She looked at the file regarding the forged cancellation form and the impersonation. Regarding the matter of the forged signature and the fraudulent communication with Rosebridge Manor, the judge said, "This court finds that the actions of Vivian Marlowe constitute criminal fraud and identity theft." The room went dead silent. My mother grabbed the podium. "This is a civil trial," the judge said. "However, given the severity of the evidence, I am prepared to refer this matter to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation." Mrs. Marlowe could face charges for forgery in the second degree and criminal impersonation. Harper leaned over to me. Her voice was a whisper in my ear. "This is it, Ella," She said, "It is up to you. The judge is signaling that she will only forward the referral if the victim you wants to pursue it. You have the right to press charges. You can send her to jail." I looked at my mother. She was staring at me. Her face was stripped of all its power. She looked terrified. For the first time, she wasn't looking at me like an asset or a disappointment. She was looking at me like I was the only person in the world who could save her. I looked at my father. He had his face buried in his hands. I thought about the orange jumpsuit. I thought about the handcuffs. I thought about the trial that would drag on for another year. The cameras, the scandal, and then I thought about the silence of a jail cell versus the silence of an empty mansion they could no longer afford. I stood up. "Your Honor," I said. My voice was steady. I did not shake. "Miss Scott," the judge asked, "do you wish to make a statement regarding the criminal referral?" "I do," I said. I looked straight at my mother. I held her gaze until she blinked. "I do not want to see my mother in prison," I said. I heard my father let out a sob of relief. My mother's shoulder sagged. "Prison is too easy," I continued. My mother's head snapped up. "If she goes to prison," I said, "she gets to be a martyr. She gets to tell everyone she sacrificed herself for her family. She gets to be the tragic victim of a cruel system." I took a breath. The real punishment for people like my parents is not a cage. It is irrelevance. It is living in a world where their money can no longer cover up who they really are. It is watching me walk out of this room and knowing they can never control me again. It is knowing that they have to sell their furniture to pay me back. It is knowing that they have lost the only thing that actually mattered to them, their image. I turned back to the judge. "Restoring the trust is enough for me, Your Honor. I do not need the state to punish them. I am going to let them punish themselves by living with the truth." The judge looked at me for a long moment. There was a flicker of respect in her eyes. "Very well," she said. "The court accepts the plaintiff's position. The criminal referral is withheld provided the defendants comply strictly with the restitution schedule. But let me be clear." She pointed her gavel at my mother. "This is a mercy you do not deserve. If you miss one payment, if you violate one order, I will reopen this file and I will sign the warrant myself." "Understood," my mother whispered. "Case closed," the judge said. She banged the gavel. It was over. I turned to Harper and hugged her. It wasn't a polite hug. It was a desperate, bone-crushing embrace. Then I turned to Noah. He didn't say anything. He just pulled me into his chest and held me there while the courtroom emptied out. "Let's go," I said. We walked out of the heavy oak doors of the courtroom. The hallway was lined with reporters. As soon as they saw me, the shouting started. "Ella, did you really refuse to send your mother to jail? Ella, are you going to evict your parents? Mrs. Marlowe, is it true the house is for sale?" The camera flashes were blinding, popping like strobes in a nightclub, but I didn't stop. I didn't answer. I didn't put my hand up to shield my face. I walked through the gauntlet of noise. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the courthouse and stepped out onto the steps. It was cold. A sharp, biting wind was blowing through the streets of Briarford. It whipped my hair across my face. It stung my cheeks, but it felt good. It didn't feel like the warm breeze of a fairy tale ending. Felt like a storm. Felt like the air was scrubbing me clean. It was the wind of a person who had just walked out of a circus tent, leaving the stale smell of popcorn and sawdust behind and stepped into the real world. I walked down the steps to where my car was waiting. Noah opened the door for me. I slid into the passenger seat. I pulled the door shut, muffling the sound of the shouting reporters. My phone, which I had silenced during the hearing, began to buzz against my thigh. I pulled it out. Incoming call, Mom. Incoming call, Dad. Incoming call, Belle. They were calling. Of course, they were calling. They wanted to thank me. They wanted to explain. They wanted to spin the narrative one last time. They wanted to gaslight me into believing that my mercy was actually their victory. I looked at the screen. I looked at the names that had defined my existence for 29 years. I didn't answer. I opened my messaging app. I created a new group chat with all three of them. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I thought about writing a paragraph. I thought about telling them I loved them, but I couldn't know them anymore. I thought about explaining why I did what I did. But then I remembered the hook. I remembered the line that started it all. We are not funding this circus. I typed 6 words. The circus is already full. I hit send. Then I went to the settings menu. I selected block contact for Vivian Marlowe, then for Charles Marlowe, then for Belle Marlowe. I put the phone down on the center console. The screen went black. I looked over at Noah. He was watching me, his hand on the gear shift. Where to? He asked. Anywhere, I said. Just drive. As the car pulled away from the curb, leaving the courthouse and the reporters and the ruins of the Marlowe dynasty in the rearview mirror, I took a deep breath. I was broke until the restitution check started coming. I was an orphan by choice. I was the scandal of the town. But for the first time in my life, the person sitting in this seat was actually me. The video cuts back to the present day. I am sitting in my apartment. The lamp is still casting that warm yellow glow. The pile of wedding invitations is gone from the table. The engagement ring is back on my finger. Catching the light, I lean forward into the camera lens. My expression is not angry. It is calm. It is the calm of someone who has survived the fire. They told me they would not fund the circus of my life, I say to you. They thought that by cutting the strings I would collapse. But what they did not realize is that I was never the puppet. I was the puppeteer waiting for my moment. I pick up the green sketchbook, the one I recovered from under the stairs, and hold it up. Turns out the thing I needed was not their money. It was not their approval. It was the courage to take the scissors and cut the cords that tied me to their stage. I did not need them to build my life. I just needed them to get out of the way. I smile, and this time it reaches my eyes. The circus is closed, guys, but the show, my show, it is just getting started, and this time I am the one writing the script.